You wake, and the weight feels heavier than your body itself. The mirror reflects a stranger moving through motions that no longer carry meaning. Everything around you continues its cycle. The world spins, people speak, notifications ping, yet inside you there is silence so vast it feels like drowning. What so many call depression might not be illness at all, but something far more essential: disconnection from the inner self, the quiet architect who knows your true purpose and has been calling you back home all along. This is not a medical diagnosis being dismissed, but an invitation to see the emptiness not as pathology, but as a sacred message, the soul's way of saying, you have wandered too far from the path only you were meant to walk. Before diving deeper into this journey of reconnection and discovering what your inner self has been trying to tell you all this time, consider becoming part of this ongoing exploration. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next step in this series on deep self-knowledge and authentic transformation. Each week brings new insights, practices, and reflections designed to guide you back to that place within where clarity lives. You will find additional resources and curated playlists in the pinned comment and video description to support your personal path forward. Now, returning to the heart of our exploration, let us examine what happens when we lose touch with that inner compass. The modern world trains you brilliantly to perform, to succeed, to project an image that wins approval, but somewhere in that relentless training, the thread connecting you to your essence frays and finally snaps. You become proficient at surviving, but a stranger to truly living. The roles you play, the identities you adopt, the masks you wear to fit into family, work, relationships, all of these accumulate until the weight becomes unbearable. Underneath all that performance, the inner self waits patiently, holding the blueprint of who you actually are, what you came here to experience, and the direction your life was meant to take before fear and conditioning redirected you. When depression arrives, it arrives not as enemy but as messenger. It signals that the distance between the life you are living and the life your soul intended has become too great to ignore any longer. Every ounce of exhaustion, every moment of numbness, every morning you cannot find a reason to rise, is your psyche's way of saying the performance is over, the costumes no longer fit, and you must return to the source. Carl Jung understood this profoundly when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are rather than who the world demands you be. Individuation is not self-improvement or the polishing of an image. It is the courageous stripping away of everything false until only the authentic remains. Depression in this light becomes the beginning of that stripping away, the first uncomfortable step toward wholeness. Your inner self does not shout, it whispers. It sends signals through your body, through restlessness, through dreams, through sudden tears that seem to come from nowhere. It communicates in the language of feeling and intuition, not logic and analysis. When you ignore these signals, they grow louder, manifesting as anxiety, illness, relationship breakdowns, or the pervasive sense that nothing matters. These are not punishments. They are recalibrations. Your psyche is attempting to pull you out of a life that does not belong to you and guide you back toward the one that does. Imagine for a moment that your purpose is not something you need to achieve or attain, but something you need to remember. The inner self already holds this memory. It knows the texture of your unique calling, the specific contribution only you can make, the way your presence is meant to ripple through the world. But to hear that knowledge, you must quiet the noise. You must stop running, stop filling every moment with distraction, stop searching outside yourself for validation that can only come from within. The silence you fear is actually the doorway. What keeps you disconnected is not laziness or weakness, but terror. Terror of what you might discover if you truly look inward. Terror that the life you have built, the identity you have crafted, the relationships you have maintained might all be revealed as constructions rather than truth. There is a grief in that realization, and grief is another language of the soul. To reconnect with your inner self, you must be willing to grieve the false versions of yourself, the dreams that were never truly yours, the ambitions planted by others. Only when you release what does not belong can you reclaim what does. Think of your life as a house filled with furniture that someone else chose. You have lived in that house so long, you forgot you could rearrange it or even move entirely. Depression is the moment you finally sit down in the middle of that house and admit it does not feel like home. The exhaustion is not from living, but from pretending. The sadness is not random, but specific. It mourns the disconnection from your true self. And the way forward is not to redecorate, but to remember what home actually feels like and begin the journey back. Jung spoke of the self, the central archetype that holds the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow. The self is not concerned with your ego's achievements or failures. It cares only about wholeness. When you are fragmented, living in pieces, giving parts of yourself away to please others, denying aspects of yourself that feel unacceptable, the self creates friction. That friction shows up as inner conflict, confusion, and yes, depression. The self wants integration. It wants you to gather all the scattered pieces and bring them home. This process is not comfortable. It requires facing what you have hidden, acknowledging desires you have suppressed, forgiving choices you regret, and accepting that becoming whole means embracing complexity, paradox, and imperfection. There is a part of you that knows this already. It is the part that feels relief when someone gives you permission to stop trying so hard. It is the part that weeps when you encounter beauty or truth. It is the part that feels most alive, not when you accomplish something impressive, but when you are simply present, connected, real. That part is your inner self. It has never left. You have only learned to ignore it. The journey back begins with the smallest act of attention. Sit quietly and ask, what do I actually feel right now? Not what you should feel, not what you wish you felt, but what is true in this moment. Your body holds the answers. Tension in your chest might be unexpressed anger. A knot in your stomach might be fear. A heaviness in your limbs might be sorrow. Listen without judgment. These sensations are not problems to fix. They are information. They tell you where you have abandoned yourself and where you need to return. As you begin to listen, patterns emerge. You notice the situations that drain you, the people who leave you feeling empty, the activities you perform out of obligation rather than desire. You also notice the moments that bring unexpected lightness, the conversations that feel nourishing, the activities where time disappears. Your inner self is guiding you through these breadcrumbs. It is showing you the difference between a life aligned with your essence and a life constructed to meet external expectations. Following that guidance requires courage because it will ask you to make changes. It will ask you to set boundaries, to say no, to disappoint people, to risk rejection. It will ask you to walk away from what is familiar and step into uncertainty. But here is the paradox. The uncertainty outside is far less frightening than the certainty inside that you are living the wrong life. When you align with your inner self, a strange kind of ease appears. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of meaning. Struggles become purposeful, failures become lessons, pain becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift in perspective is the hallmark of reconnection. Depression tells you that you have been living someone else's script. Reconnection invites you to write your own. And writing your own does not mean you become selfish or reckless. It means you become authentic. Authenticity benefits everyone because it gives others permission to do the same. When you stop pretending, you create space for real connection. When you honor your truth, you inspire others to honor theirs. The ripple effect of one person returning to their inner self is immeasurable. Your purpose is not a job title or a role. It is a quality of presence. It is the way you show up in the world when you are no longer performing. It is the kindness that flows naturally when you are not depleted. It is the creativity that emerges when you stop forcing. It is the love that becomes possible when you are no longer afraid. The inner self does not ask you to be extraordinary. It asks you to be real. And in a world that constantly demands performance, being real is the most revolutionary act. Consider the symbol of the labyrinth, an ancient image found in cultures across the world. The labyrinth is not a maze. There are no wrong turns. There is only one path that spirals inward to the center and then spirals back out. The journey into the labyrinth represents the journey into the self. It is winding, disorienting, sometimes frightening, but it always leads to the center. And once you reach the center, you must walk the same path back out, but you are changed. You carry the knowledge of the center with you. Depression is your entrance into the labyrinth. Reconnection is the journey to the center. And living with purpose is the walk back out, bringing the wisdom of the inner self into your everyday life. You are not broken. You are being called. The heaviness you feel is not meaningless. It is the weight of a life that no longer fits. And the emptiness is not absence. It is space being cleared for something true. Your inner self has been waiting for this moment. The moment you stop running and start listening. The moment you stop trying to fix yourself and start remembering yourself. The moment you realize that the purpose you have been seeking is not out there, but in here, woven into the fabric of who you have always been. What if depression is not the problem, but the solution? The psyche's way of forcing a pause, demanding a reckoning, insisting that you stop and turn inward. What if the exhaustion is not weakness, but wisdom? The body's refusal to continue down a path that leads nowhere. What if the sadness is not pathology, but clarity? The soul's mourning for the life it knows you are capable of living, but have not yet claimed. You do not need to be cured, you need to be heard. And the one who needs to hear you most is you. The inner self speaks in whispers, in dreams, in fleeting intuitions, in the quiet knowing that arises when you stop long enough to feel. It does not argue or demand. It simply holds the truth and waits for you to remember. Every spiritual tradition points to this same knowing. The kingdom of heaven is within. The self is Brahman. Buddha nature resides in all beings. Know thyself. These are not abstract philosophies, but practical instructions. Look inward. The answers you seek are already there. The purpose you long for is already alive in you. You have simply been taught to look everywhere else. Reconnection is not a destination. It is a practice. It is the daily choice to pause, to breathe, to ask what is true for me right now. It is the willingness to feel what you have been avoiding. It is the courage to act on what you know, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. It is the commitment to honor your inner self above all the voices that tell you to be different, smaller, safer. And as you practice, something shifts. The world does not change, but your relationship to it does. You stop seeking permission and start trusting yourself. You stop waiting for clarity and start moving with intuition. You stop measuring your worth by external standards and start recognizing your inherent value. The depression that once felt like a prison becomes the portal that led you home. There will be days when the disconnection returns. This is not failure. It is part of the spiral. You move closer to the center, then drift away, then return again, each time with deeper understanding. The journey of individuation is lifelong. But once you have tasted reconnection, once you have felt the alignment between your inner truth and your outer life, you can never fully forget. That taste becomes your compass. It calls you back whenever you wander. Your purpose is not something you find. It is something you embody. It is the natural expression of who you are. when you are no longer hiding. It is what happens when you stop asking, "What should I do with my life?" and start asking, "Who am I when I am most alive?" The answer to that question is your purpose, and it has been inside you all along, held safe by the inner self, waiting for the moment you are ready to remember. That moment is now, not when you feel better, not when circumstances change, not when you have figured it all out. Now, in this breath, in this quiet instant where the noise of the world fades and the whisper of your soul can finally be heard, you are not depressed, you are disconnected. And the reconnection begins the moment you choose to listen, the moment you honor the call, the moment you step onto the path that has always been yours. There is no rush. There is no right way. There is only the gentle, persistent invitation from the inner self to come home, to remember, to live the life that is truly yours. And in that living, you will discover that purpose was never something to achieve. It was always something to be. Jung understood that the process of becoming whole requires descending into the parts of yourself you have disowned. He called this the shadow, the repository of everything you have rejected, judged, or hidden away, because it did not fit the image you wanted to present. The shadow holds your rage, your envy, your selfishness, your hungers, all the messy, uncomfortable, inconvenient parts of being human, and it also holds your power, your creativity, your passion, your wildness. When you reject the shadow, you do not make it disappear. You simply lose access to the energy it contains. That energy does not vanish. It turns inward, creating depression, anxiety, psychosomatic symptoms, or it projects outward, causing you to see in others what you cannot acknowledge in yourself. The journey back to the inner self demands shadow work. It demands that you stop pretending to be only light and start embracing the full spectrum of your humanity. This does not mean acting on every impulse or indulging destructive behavior. It means acknowledging what is true. It means saying, "Yes, I feel anger. Yes, I feel jealousy. Yes, I feel desire." And instead of shaming those feelings, you ask what they are trying to tell you. Anger might be protecting a boundary that was violated. Jealousy might be pointing towards something you long for but have not allowed yourself to pursue. Desire might be the life force itself, calling you back into your body, back into aliveness. When you integrate the shadow, you reclaim the energy that was locked away. You become more whole, more real, more capable of living with purpose because you are no longer spending half your energy keeping parts of yourself hidden. This integration is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing practice of honesty, of turning toward what you would rather avoid, of meeting yourself with compassion instead of judgment. The inner self does not require you to be perfect. It requires you to be whole. And wholeness includes everything, the beautiful and the broken, the noble and the petty, the enlightened and the wounded. There is a story told in many mystical traditions about the pearl. The pearl forms when an irritant, a grain of sand, enters the oyster. The oyster does not expel the irritant. Instead, it coats it layer by layer with nacre until something beautiful emerges from what was originally a source of pain. Your suffering, your depression, your disconnection is the grain of sand. The work of reconnecting to your inner self is the process of coating that pain with awareness, with presence, with compassion, until it transforms into something luminous. This is the alchemical process Jung spoke of, the transformation of base material into gold, of suffering into wisdom, of fragmentation into wholeness. Depression, in this context, is not an enemy to be defeated, but raw material to be transformed. It is the invitation to begin the alchemical work of your own becoming. Consider what happens when you stop resisting the depression and instead ask it what it wants. Not in a passive, victimized way, but in a curious, open way. What is this feeling trying to protect me from? What part of my life is out of alignment? What have I been ignoring? What am I being called toward? Depression often arises at thresholds, moments when the old way of being no longer works, but the new way has not yet emerged. You are between identities, between chapters, between versions of yourself. This liminal space is uncomfortable because it lacks definition. You do not know who you are becoming. You only know you can no longer be who you were. The inner self understands this threshold. It has been guiding you toward it, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully. And now that you are here, in the unknown, it asks you to trust that not knowing is part of the process, to trust that the emptiness is not permanent, but preparatory, to trust that on the other side of this dissolution is a truer, more authentic way of being. But trust is hard when you have been conditioned to control, to plan, to know. The modern world does not teach you how to navigate uncertainty. It teaches you to avoid it at all costs. And so when life brings you to a threshold, when the inner self dismantles what no longer serves, your instinct is to panic, to cling, to try to rebuild what is crumbling. But what if, instead, you allowed the crumbling? What if you trusted that what is falling away needs to fall away? What if you saw this not as failure, but as necessary destruction, the clearing of ground so something new can grow? There is a season for everything, a season for building and a season for letting go, a season for doing and a season for being, a season for certainty and a season for surrender. Depression might be the season of surrender, the season when you stop forcing and start allowing, the season when you stop performing and start feeling, the season when you stop running and start listening. And in that listening, the inner self can finally be heard. It has been speaking all along, but only in the stillness, in the emptiness, in the silence you have been avoiding, can its voice become clear. What does the inner self want to tell you? It wants to remind you that you are not your achievements, you are not your failures, you are not your roles or your titles or your bank account or your social media presence. You are something far more essential, far more mysterious, far more sacred. You are a soul having a human experience, and that soul has an agenda that is often at odds with the ego's agenda. The ego wants safety, approval, success, control. The soul wants growth, truth, connection, wholeness, and when those agendas conflict, depression is often the result. The ego cannot understand why you would walk away from a prestigious job, end a relationship that looks perfect from the outside, or choose a path that makes no logical sense. But the soul knows. The soul knows what you need to become who you truly are. And it will dismantle anything that stands in the way of that becoming, including your carefully constructed identity. This is terrifying. It feels like dying. And in a sense, it is. It is the death of the false self. The death of the persona, the mask you have worn for so long you mistook it for your face. But beneath the mask is your true face. Beneath the persona is your authentic self. Beneath the performance is the presence. And that presence is what the world actually needs from you. Not your perfection, not your productivity, not your likability, your presence, the unique quality of being that only you possess. The specific way you see the world, the particular gifts you carry, the distinct frequency you vibrate at when you are aligned with your inner self. When you live from that place, you do not have to search for purpose. Purpose flows naturally. It is simply what happens when you show up as yourself. Think of the archetypes Jung identified, universal patterns of human experience that appear across cultures and throughout history. The hero, the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the shadow, the anima, the animus. These archetypes live within you. They are the different energies, different aspects of the psyche that you can draw on at different times. Depression might signal that you have been living out the wrong archetype, playing a role that does not fit your current stage of life. Maybe you have been the hero for too long, constantly striving, conquering, achieving, and now your soul is calling you to step into the role of the sage, to slow down, to reflect, to integrate. Maybe you have been the caregiver, endlessly giving to others, And now the inner self is demanding that you learn to receive, to nourish yourself, to reclaim your own needs. Maybe you have been the innocent, naive, and trusting, and now life is asking you to integrate the warrior, to set boundaries, to protect your energy. Each archetype has its season, and part of living with purpose is knowing which archetype to embody in each moment. The inner self holds this wisdom. It knows when it is time to fight and when it is time to surrender, when it is time to speak and when it is time to listen, when it is time to build and when it is time to rest. But you can only access this wisdom when you are connected. When you are disconnected, you keep playing the same role over and over, even when it no longer serves. You keep being the hero when the battle is over. You keep being the caregiver when your own cup is empty. You keep being the innocent when the world is asking you to grow up. And that misalignment creates suffering. It creates depression, because you are living out of sync with your own truth. The path forward is to ask, what archetype is calling me now? What energy wants to emerge? What role is my soul asking me to step into? And then courageously to let go of the old and embrace the new. This requires trust. It requires faith, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in a psychological and spiritual sense. Faith that the psyche knows what it is doing. Faith that the inner self is guiding you toward wholeness even when the path is unclear. Faith that the depression is not a dead end, but a doorway. Jung spoke of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that occur when you are aligned with the self. When you are disconnected, life feels random, chaotic, meaningless. But when you reconnect, you begin to notice patterns. A book falls off the shelf and it contains exactly the message you needed. A conversation with a stranger opens a door you did not know existed. A dream provides insight into a problem you have been struggling with. These synchronicities are not magic. They are the natural result of alignment. When you are connected to your inner self, you are also connected to the larger web of meaning that underlies existence. You become attuned to the subtle signals, the quiet nudges, the invisible threads that connect all things. And life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a dance. But to experience this, you must slow down. You must create space. You must stop filling every moment with noise and distraction. You must sit with the discomfort. You must allow the silence. You must listen. And in that listening, the inner self will guide you. It will show you the next step, not the whole staircase, just the next step. And that is enough, because the journey of reconnection is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting the process. It is about showing up day after day with curiosity and courage. It's about honoring the whispers before they become screams. It's about choosing authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, presence over performance. There is a cost to living this way. You will disappoint people. You will lose relationships that were based on the false self. You will face criticism and judgment. You will walk away from opportunities that do not align. You will make choices that others do not understand. But the cost of not living this way is higher. The cost is your soul. The cost is your aliveness. The cost is spending your one precious life performing a role that was never yours to play. And when you reach the end, when you look back, what will matter is not how well you performed, but how fully you lived. Not how much you achieved, but how deeply you connected. Not how perfect you appeared, but how real you were. The inner self knows this. It is not impressed by your accomplishments or your accolades. It only cares whether you had the courage to be yourself, whether you honored the truth of your experience, whether you followed the path that was uniquely yours. And if you have been depressed, if you have been disconnected, if you have been lost, this is your chance. This is your invitation. This is your moment to choose differently, to stop running and start listening, to stop pretending and start being, to stop searching outside and start remembering inside. The world needs people who are awake, who are connected, who are living from their inner self, not because those people are perfect, but because they are real. And in a world of performance and pretense, realness is revolutionary. It gives others permission to be real too. It creates ripples. It shifts consciousness. It changes the collective in ways you cannot measure but can certainly feel. You are not here to be like everyone else. You are here to be like you. And the only one who knows what that looks like is your inner self. So listen, trust, follow, even when it is hard, even when it is scary, even when it makes no sense. Because on the other side of that following is the life you were always meant to live, the purpose you were always meant to embody, the presence you were always meant to offer. And that is not something you find. It is something you become. It is something you are. It is something you have always been, waiting beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the masks, beneath the fear, waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to come home. The depression you have been carrying is not evidence of weakness, but proof that you are still alive, still capable of feeling, still connected enough to your soul to know when something is wrong. Many people numb themselves completely, building walls so high they no longer feel anything at all. But you feel. You feel the emptiness, the disconnection, the ache, and that feeling, as painful as it is actually a gift. It means you have not given up. It means some part of you is still fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be lived. Honor that part. Thank it. It has been trying to save you. The inner self does not abandon you in your darkest moments. It moves closer. It whispers louder. It sends you dreams that wake you in the middle of the night, tears that come without warning, longings that will not be silenced. These are not symptoms of something broken.